Well, I just want to thank you all for being here bright and early on a Saturday morning. I have 4 children and a wonderful husband, and I know how hard it is to dedicate a Saturday to come and be at a conference like this. I know Saturdays are really busy for families, so bravo to you for dedicating a day of your life to learn more about pro-life issues, to really think about what you can do for the pro-life movement, and to listen to these wonderful speakers that follow me here today. So I'm here to share with you my testimony, my pro-life testimony. And you know, there's lots of different kinds of pro-life testimonies. I have friends who have worked in the abortion industry, and they have amazing, breathtaking things to share about their journey and their work within the abortion industry before they left. I have friends who are actual abortion survivors, my one friend, Claire Colwell, her twin was aborted and she was not. If you've ever seen the movie October Baby, that's her story. So she gives a moving, just gut-wrenching testimony when she speaks. I have friends who have been on the sidewalks and down in the real work of saving women day to day in crisis pregnancy centers and maternity homes. But my testimony is a little different. I have a more simple story, but I hope that maybe it might be one that you could relate to, because I just have a simple testimony of being a servant in the pro-life movement and just doing what God has called me to do. And so I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. I do have to qualify, I'm from Texas, so you might hear, I've been told I don't have a really strong Texas accent, but you might hear a few y'alls thrown in there, and I apologize in advance. Like I told the group I spoke with on Tuesday, I tried to tone down the mascara to just 1 coat instead of like 3 or 4. I haven't yet gotten into the false eyelashes, but I'm feeling the pressure, so we'll see if I get there. But I'm really excited to be here, and I came with my son from Texas to be with you today. And we spent a great week here in California and visiting family and friends, and it's been wonderful. So thank you for your hospitality. So what I want to do is give you a little bit of history throughout my presentation this morning and start off with the very beginning. Once upon a time, after I became Catholic, I was the leader of our church's pro-life organization. We had a Respect Life committee at St. Mary's in College Station, and we had a nice little group of about 15, 20 college students and a few community members that met every week. And we would talk amongst ourselves about how blessed we were that in Bryan College Station there was no abortion clinic. We had a Planned Parenthood, but they didn't do much. They just kind of gave out contraception and things like that, and we weren't too worried about what they were doing at the time. Little did we know we should have been. So we'd meet in our church's library, and we would talk about developmental facts and fetal development and read brochures out loud to each other, and all the while thinking, wow, aren't we lucky? We're the lucky ones. We can be involved in the pro-life movement, but we don't have to do all that hard work out on the sidewalks in front of those abortion clinics. We can just sit here and pray and read pamphlets and pat ourselves on the back that we're doing such good work. Well, once you start thinking that way, you know, God always likes to shake you up a bit. So sure enough, he did. A few days later, after that one meeting where we were having this discussion, I was working at my church at St. Mary's, and there was a phone call. I answered the phone at the time and took a message. And at the time, the pastor was busy, and there was a reporter on the line who wanted to talk to him. And I said, well, Father Mike, who's now Bishop Mike of San Angelo, Texas, he's not available. Can I take a message? And she said, well, I really just want a statement from him regarding Planned Parenthood building the first abortion clinic in Aggieland in Bryan College Station. And so that's how I first found out that Planned Parenthood was opening an abortion facility in our community, the first one. And all of those feelings of being the lucky ones went out the window. So everything really sped right along from there. Our weekly pro-life meeting, where we used to just read facts and have cookies and stuff, really changed. And it turned into a meeting of over 400 people from our community, over 70 different churches. Literally, we used to meet in our library, which had a little table, kind of about the size of half of these here that you're sitting at, in a little room. And sure enough, as word got out, the newspaper got a hold of one of our flyers for our meeting, the TV station got a hold of one of our flyers, and we quickly had to move our regular pro-life meeting into the sanctuary at St. Mary's. And we were overflowing. It was standing room only at St. Mary's Catholic Center there in College Station. So we started and began the Coalition for Life there that evening, and it's been growing ever since. Now, I have to admit, when we started the Coalition for Life, and I was young, I had never run a nonprofit before, I had never worked in a big pro-life organization before, we really weren't sure what we were doing. We had lots of energy, we had good intentions, but we really needed a mission, and we needed guidance. And despite our inexperience and nervousness, God provided all of those things to us. And I remember many an evening, once we were donated an office space, I would drive home and I'd stop by my friend's house who had just had a new baby, and I would sit on their couch in their tiny apartment and hold that little baby and just take deep breaths and pray the rosary with my friends, and I would try to remember why we were doing what we were doing, because it was very stressful, it was hard. Now, we had many goals. We had lots of groups courting us. We had Texas Right to Life coming to us. We had national groups coming to us, trying to tell us what you should do and telling us how to do our work. And so we realized at the beginning of the Coalition for Life that we needed to come up with some specific goals of what we were going to do in our community. Planned Parenthood had bought property. There was nothing on the property, so we knew we had an opportunity possibly to prevent them from opening. A funny story, as they eventually did build the Planned Parenthood facility, we would go and pray. They eventually put up a fence, just a metal fence at first, and then a bigger steel fence. But we would pray, we would throw holy medals over the fence into the land where they built the clinic. We would throw holy water. We did all kinds of crazy things. I don't know how many medals are in that foundation today, but I know there's a lot of them. So there was lots of prayer and action in all of that. So we really wanted to find our real mission, our true goals. We realized we couldn't do everything. The pro-life movement is very varied, which is great, but when you're in a small grassroots organization, you have to come up with specific goals. So we wanted, at first, our first goal was to prevent Planned Parenthood from breaking ground. Well, they broke ground anyway. Then our goal was to prevent them from opening their doors. They opened their doors anyway. And then after that, our goal was to prevent them from providing abortion services, but they ended up providing abortion services anyway. So we soon and very quickly came to learn that the pro-life movement is not for the weary of heart. It takes those of us, like us here, with great faith to keep moving forward, no matter what the cost, no matter the discouragements that come our way. And we have to remember that when we have setbacks, God gives us faith and encouragement. And he tells us in Hebrews 55, verse 8, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, and your ways are not my ways." And I learned that verse, he's really serious when he says that to us. He means it. His ways are not our ways. And it became very real for me when we were beginning the Coalition for Life. There's an opportunity to fail to accept this teaching. And to really, if we fail to believe this teaching, then we can lead ourselves to discouragement and burnout in the pro-life movement. So we have to really pray this verse in our hearts and understand that God has a plan. God needs our cooperation in this world, but he has a plan for good, and we need to be faithful and move forward knowing that he knows what he's doing. You've all heard the saying that if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. Well, those of us who are here today and who work in the pro-life movement have learned this lesson over and over again. The battle is so much bigger than we see around us. It's not just a battle of choices or healthcare options or dealing with poverty. This is a spiritual battle. This is a spiritual evil who has come to our country and to our planet. And we are the workers, the diligent workers in this field that have to fight that battle for God. We are his hands and feet. And we have to remember that. We have to bring our work to prayer. We have to offer it up no matter where we are, whether you're a speaker talking to groups around town, whether you counsel women who are considering abortion, whether you're a teacher, whether you're in your office and just have conversations with people that you meet. You have to bring every moment to prayer so that you can be that open witness to life whenever God calls you to. And we have to trust in him. We have to trust God that we're not working in the pro-life movement so that we can count numbers. We're not here to count the number of babies we've saved or the number of women we've served. We're not here to count the number of anything, really. We're here because we have to be. We're here because if we're not here, then no one will be here. No one will be here standing for those women in crisis and for those children who need our help to live. And we leave all the rest to God. So honestly, when Planned Parenthood opened its doors in Bryan College Station, I was really sad, but I was determined not to be discouraged. And when they began performing abortions, I was horrified. I had nightmares, but I was still determined not to be discouraged. I knew we simply had to keep moving forward, keep praying, and keep doing the best work we could, and leave the rest to God. So during that time of discernment, some friends of mine and I took a trip to Dallas. We had heard of two women up in Dallas, Texas, who were phenomenal sidewalk counselors, and everywhere we went, they said, you have to go visit these two women, Jean Key and Fonda Lash, who were out on the sidewalks. They had dedicated their lives to the missionary work of sidewalk counseling. And so it was there that we really realized our mission was on the sidewalk, offering a prayerful, peaceful presence to the women and the workers and to the community around there. We learned what we needed to say to women considering abortion. We learned how to pray, how to offer everything up on the sidewalk, every second, up to God. And we watched in wide-eyed wonder as Jean escorted one woman after another away from the abortion clinic and around the corner to the crisis pregnancy center. And after we got there, we had been there for about an hour in front of this little, it was kind of an old converted house on a busy street, standing in front of the sidewalk, and people were walking back and forth to the bus stop. And Jean reached out to every single person who was going in that clinic. And so she had someone who stopped to talk to her who wanted to go get her free ultrasound at the crisis pregnancy center that was just a few blocks away. And so she looked up at us and she said, well, girls, she handed us her pamphlets and she said, you're on, and she took off. And my friend Helen and I looked at each other and we said, okay, well, I guess here's where we begin. And that was the first time we sidewalk counseled. And we followed with the Coalition for Life and many different organizations around the country, followed the method of the Helpers of God's Precious Infants. And I highly encourage you to look that organization up when you have some time. It's led and founded by Monsignor Philip Riley, who I believe someday will be a saint. He's a very holy and loving and kind man and very brave. And I love this story of him. He visited Kent, England in 2011. And he was teaching a group to sidewalk counsel out on the streets. And then when the police told him that everyone inside the abortion clinic was disturbed by what was going on outside, Monsignor Riley replied, what, everyone? And the policeman said, well, yes. And he said, oh, wonderful. And that shows the joyful perseverance and faithfulness that we need to have when we're on the sidewalks, when we're helping women, to not get discouraged and to see every opportunity as an opportunity for God to intervene. So as we continued forming the Coalition for Life, gathering supporters, the community started to really learn that this was important and started to get involved. And we were determined that we didn't want to be just philosophical pro-lifers. We didn't want to just learn and discuss and evaluate topics, which is very important to do that, and that's part of the reason why we're here today. But we didn't want to stop there. We didn't want to just sit in our houses and in our classrooms and in our church libraries having meetings. We really wanted to get boots on the ground. We wanted to do real work. And learning sidewalk counseling from these loving and courageous women was a huge part of that. So it was very hard in the beginning of the Coalition for Life. For 15 years, it was difficult, and I was the director of the Coalition for Life for about 4 years, but for a long time I was involved after that. And there was a gas station driving from my house when I would go to, our office was right next door to the Planned Parenthood facility. They eventually bought a house right across the street and was able to have a big, huge sign put up that said free pregnancy tests here, free ultrasounds here, and Planned Parenthood wasn't really happy with that. So I would drive down that road, and every time I saw the gas station that was right before the curve in the road, before Planned Parenthood, my stomach would sink, and it became just a physiological reaction to getting close to that clinic. I would feel that dread in the pit of my stomach, and I knew the abortion clinic was right around the corner. But thankfully, today, praise God, in Bryan College Station, there's no more dread when anyone turns that corner. There is no more fear, and there is no more sadness, because our Planned Parenthood closed in 2013, and we have no more abortion services there in Bryan College Station at this time. We had a big celebration after this happened. It was the result of a lot of work. It's a beautiful example of the pro-life community coming together and working together, and there are many different facets. And we all have to admit that sometimes that does not happen very well. But this is a good example of the political side, the action side, the prayer side, everyone coming together to work towards good. And so we're very excited, and we love this picture. So now there's nothing to fear there from that location on East 29th Street. The building is for sale. Planned Parenthood is very leery of who they want to sell it to. And we've tried, but we'll see what happens there. And we're just thankful now that it is closed. So we have immense hope now because of this picture here. But we realize too that no matter what we feel, no matter how long we wait, no matter how hard it might be, God is always faithful. It might take 10 years, it might take 5 years, it might take 15 years as it did for us. And it might take 100 years. You may never see tangible results of your work. But he makes us wait sometimes for something bigger that he has in store, and that's why we know that God's ways are not our ways. And honestly, I think I never really could have seen the day, and I never thought I could see the day that this would happen and that I could stand here and tell you this story. But we are here, and we're just amazed by God's faithfulness and mercy and dedication. We show him our faithfulness, and he always answers beyond our wildest expectations. So, just a year and a half ago, after the clinic closed, we had a 40 Days for Life celebration. The Coalition for Life is actually, when we started discerning our sidewalk counseling, we realized we needed counselors on the sidewalk. Some people weren't ready to counsel. That wasn't something that they could do. But we also knew that those sidewalk counselors needed a sturdy wall of prayer support. And so we also had a lot of prayer on the sidewalk. And out of that movement, we realized we needed more and more consistency. We wanted to reach all of the women. We knew that our prayer and our presence on the sidewalk affected the people inside that building, even though they didn't want to admit it. And so out of that came the 40 Days for Life campaign. What we started there at the Coalition for Life, we realized over time, with much prayer and discernment, that we could package that, we could make it 40 days long, something that was a little more tangible for people to deal with in their daily schedules. And it became, as you well know, a worldwide movement. And so we had, after the clinic closed, we had a big celebration in Bryan College Station with lots of people from all over the world came. And I was stunned as we had a dinner and I met all these different people, and I really just wanted to sit there and ask them why. What is it about you? What made you get involved in the pro-life movement? And at that dinner, I heard many beautiful stories as people started to share the reasons they became involved. And I began to think, as I listened to these stories, of other people and the beautiful different stories that they shared. One man who was there was the 40 Days for Life coordinator in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he was out on the sidewalk day after day. It's really cold there. There was a lot of suffering on those sidewalks. And he was just getting really discouraged. And he was ready to quit. That day, he said, "This is the last day. I'm done. I'm not doing anything. This is a waste of my time. No one's changing their minds. I'm out of here. I'm going to go spend my time better." And a woman pulled up her car onto the side up to the curb there where he was standing. And she called out to him. And she told him that a week before, she heard him call out to her as she walked into the clinic. And his phrase that he always said was, she was there with her boyfriend at the time, and he said, "God bless you three." And the word three stuck in her mind. She went in the clinic, she went through the beginnings of her counseling at the abortion center, but she couldn't get rid of that number 3 in her heart. And she walked out, she went up to him, she went home. She never told him that he affected her until she pulled up on the sidewalk that day. But she went home, and now she's one of the biggest pro-life advocates in the Minnesota area. She spends lots of time on the sidewalk. Her children are with her, and it's a beautiful story. Another story that I thought of that reminds us of all of us here today is my parish priest, Father David Condola, who now runs St. Mary's Catholic Center at Texas A&M. Back at the time when we started the Coalition for Life, he was a brand new baby priest just out of the seminary, and he had been a little bit involved in the pro-life movement, but realized he had other ways he needed to spend his time as well as a priest. Until one day he heard a woman tell him that she had prayed as she was going to the abortion clinic. She found herself in a pregnancy that she couldn't deal with. And she said, "Okay, God, I'll make a deal with you. If there's someone out there, I won't go in. If there's one person out there, I'll just keep driving. I'll just keep going. I'll talk to someone. I'll get some help." No one was there. And she had her abortion. And at that moment, when Father David heard that story, he vowed that he would do as much as he could at the pulpit, on the sidewalks, and his personal counseling to be present and to make sure people were there for women in crisis. I also have my friend Caroline, who lives in Minnesota as well. I guess it's a good pro-life state to be in. She was the youngest of 8 children. The next sibling older than her was 8 years older. Her mother was pretty old when she became pregnant with her. And she had severe medical complications. The doctors told Caroline's mother that if you have this baby, you're gonna die and the baby's gonna die. So we really, you have lots of kids, you don't need another one. We really just need to schedule the abortion, it'll be no big deal. We can do this, and then you can move on and live your life as you had planned to. Well, she refused. The doctors were angry at her. People were trying to persuade her, but her husband stood by her. And 8 months later, her 8th child was born, my friend Caroline, and everything was fine. She's a perfect, beautiful young woman, and she spends a lot of her time giving her testimony to teens. And one story I can remember is me. I remember when I was just 8 years old feeling my baby sister in the womb of her mother and feeling that, putting my hand on her belly and feeling those little tiny kicks. And I remember saying out loud, wow, there's really a baby in there. And so several years later, when I heard about abortion, I was shocked. I couldn't imagine why anyone would want to kill that precious baby. And so you see, we all have a different story. Every one of us comes here to this room today for a different reason. We all have a different motivation. It might be someone in our family. It might be a crisis that you yourself have experienced. Maybe you were involved in an abortion in some way, and this is your way to heal and to make a difference after all. And so what I want to do is for you to take some time right now to remember. I think sometimes we forget why we're doing this. We just get busy doing some work in some way, and we forget why we're here and what has called us and how God has called us to be involved in the pro-life movement. And so I want to pause for a minute and let you think about that. There's some paper at the ends of your tables, and I would love for you to pass those down. I think we're used to this in church where we have to pass stuff down the aisle or the pew. So if you'll just pass those down and take one, I hope you'll have pens. And just take a moment on one side of the paper to jot down why you're here. What was the first thing that made you feel the call in your heart to be part of this radical, crazy pro-life movement? It's not easy. There's a reason you're here. You might be young, you might be a grandparent, it doesn't matter. I want you to write that down. You don't have to share it with anybody, so I want you to just take that time to think about that. I want you to take those papers home with you. We're going to use the other side in a little bit, but I want you to take these home with you today so that you can stick it in your Bible, stick it in your prayer book, put it in your bedside drawer, and really take that out every once in a while and remember the special ways that God has called you to serve and why he's called you to serve. Because I think that helps us stay dedicated. It helps us to not get burnt out in whatever kind of pro-life work we're doing. And I think that's really important for us to remember and go back to the roots. So now, as you well know, while I stood on one side of that big iron fence that surrounded our Planned Parenthood clinic in Bryan, Texas, there were more than just clients going in the building across the street. There were abortion workers in there, employees of Planned Parenthood who we saw face to face every day. And one such worker was a young woman when I started named Abby Johnson. When the clinic opened, Abby was just a college student volunteer. They wore these little bibs that were pretty ugly, kind of a bright color, and they would escort the women from their cars to inside the clinic doors, trying to prevent them from talking to anybody on the other side of the fence. They would even stand right at the entrance of the driveway and try to wave them through. Don't talk, keep coming. And then they'd wait for them at the door and walk them in. And that's the first time I ever set eyes on Abby Johnson. We were on opposite sides of the fence in so many ways, but I'd like to read you a blog post that I wrote several years ago that kind of defines our relationship back then and today. And it goes like this. A few years ago, my son Jonathan found me sitting in front of my laptop with tears streaming down my cheeks. I had just read an email and I had been stunned to silence. I was in shock with joy. The email was about Abby Johnson, the director of our local Bryan Planned Parenthood, the woman who is up for promotion to lead the Houston Planned Parenthood, the largest Planned Parenthood in the world. Abby had just announced, after years of working with the Planned Parenthood organization, that she had experienced something that made her walk out the front door of Planned Parenthood and drive over to the Coalition for Life office, which I had started, and tell them, I want out, I'm done. I'm sure many shed tears of joy that day, but I had a special, although distant, connection. 10 years earlier, I had scraped together my money left over from my grad school grant, and I quit my job at St. Mary's. I quit grad school, and I attempted to start up a new nonprofit organization, the Coalition for Life. We became a group dedicated to helping mothers and fathers find alternatives to abortion. Specifically, we countered Planned Parenthood, and I spent years there as the director. And much of my time was focused on Planned Parenthood, protesting the groundbreaking, protesting the foundation being poured, protesting the walls going up. I prayed over their opening day ceremonies, and while Abby was a college student volunteer, I stood on the other side of the fence handing out information to any mom or any dad willing to receive it. So on that day, when Abby Johnson's defection became worldwide news, I wasn't only joyful. I could see us standing there on opposite sides of that black iron fence, two women who really thought they were doing the right thing, but with two completely different answers. And all of a sudden, the fence was gone, and our answer was the same. So to me, it wasn't just a news story. It was a cosmic earthquake. My tender-hearted son, who's here in California with me this week, saw my tears, and he always wanted to take care of me when I was sad. So he asked me what was wrong. Why was I crying? Well, I've just read some very good news, I burst out. I went on to tell him the story of Abby, how she had been in charge of the abortion clinic where he had prayed as a small child. I told him that Abby had been called in to assist an ultrasound-guided abortion, something she had never been asked to do before, because this doctor wanted to have a safe abortion. While she held the ultrasound wand for the abortion doctor, she looked up on the screen, and she saw the baby fight for his life. She saw him pull away from the vacuum inserted to pull him apart and out of his mother's body. And in that moment, I told my son, Abby Johnson realized that this was a baby. After all those years, she realized abortion was murder and that she was finished with Planned Parenthood. I'm so happy, Jonathan, I told him. This is an answered prayer. That's why I'm crying. These are tears of joy. Oh, wow, he said, and his eyes were on the ground. And he looked up at me, his big blue eyes hopefully wondering. And then he said the words that I will never forget. But Mom, what about the baby? Did they save the baby? And all I had to give him was silence. Even I, with all of my history and knowledge and effort in this movement, had brushed right past that little baby and onto the celebration. And I had to tell him the truth. So my son went to his room in tears that day too, but they weren't tears of joy for Abby. He was thinking of the tiny baby that was no more. You see, my son didn't understand the incredible implications that Abby Johnson's change of heart meant for the pro-life movement, and they certainly do. He knew the building where she had worked. He had been there numerous times on the sidewalk, first when I was pregnant with him, then in his stroller, and later on his own 2 feet. And he had seen women go in and out. In his mind, uninfluenced by media or movements or politics, Abby Johnson was not a national phenomenon or an inspirational figure or the newest leader of a movement. To this boy, she was just a person, just like that baby, like the mothers and fathers coming in and out of Planned Parenthood's doors. To him, they were all equal and precious, and that's as it should be. Matthew 19:14 tells us, "Let the little children come to me. Do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." A few months later, my family and I traveled to Austin for our annual March for Life, and my son heard Abby Johnson speak from the podium. Her strong, powerful, inspiring words echoed over everyone. And they met and took a photo. And I'll never forget that we were there and that we were all now on the same side of the fence together. And our voices and hearts will always echo with my son. We will never forget. What about the baby? And here's a picture of my son and Abby that day. And I think that's a good story to remember. It taught me a lot personally, but to remember that we need to keep the innocence of a child and the purity of a child's heart in this movement, not to get so wrapped up in strategy and names and politics, but to really make sure that we're doing true work and that we're serving God and that we remember the women in crisis and their crises are real and those babies who are threatened. So for those of you who haven't heard Abby's story, you really need to. You can follow her on social media. You can buy her amazing book, Unplanned. If you haven't read it already, I encourage you to. She has another book that she's publishing soon, and she and I are working on a book together. So her story is very powerful because she has seen both sides of the pro-life movement clearly and deeply. While she speaks several times a week, and I've traveled with her to some of her events, and they're pretty, her travel schedule's crazy, she also gives a lot of time to her personal ministry, which is called And Then There Were None, and I have the privilege of helping her and working with her in this work. This ministry helps abortion workers leave the abortion movement. The majority of abortion workers who come and talk to us tell us that they get involved in the abortion industry not because they love abortion or that they're even incredibly pro-choice, but because really they're just desperate for a job. Some of them have been falsely promised that, oh, you'll never have to work with abortion procedures. They're told, oh, well, you'll just be a nurse and take care of patients afterwards, or maybe you'll just answer the phone. So they're lied to when they begin their work. Now, 70% of abortion workers have actually had abortions themselves. They're already broken people when they get there, and they're in need of just as much healing, if not more, than the women who take their services. So our goal with And Then There Were None is to provide financial, emotional, spiritual, and legal support to anyone who wishes to leave the abortion industry. The ministry provides them emotional support, spiritual advisor of the former worker's choosing, so she's Catholic, we'll help find them a Catholic advisor. If they're Protestant, whatever, we'll find them someone that they're comfortable with. We provide them legal counsel to protect the worker's interest at no cost to them during their transition. And we give them 1 month of financial support after they resign their job and help them to find a new job. Now, sidewalk counselors are also able to be trained to reach out to abortion clinic workers while they stand there also reaching out to the women. And they reach out to them in a calm and inviting manner in order to establish direct lines of communication and to give them the information they need. Experience tells us that some workers will reach out to And Then There Were None because they've heard of our work through word of mouth. One worker will call up a friend. They kind of become their own bubble of a community because it's hard to be friends with someone who works in the abortion industry, even if you're not necessarily very pro-life. So they kind of form their own little bubbles of community, and they will spread the information one by one amongst their groups. And there's lots of pro-life groups who've expressed willingness to help spread the message of our ministry to current and former abortion workers. So we make a special effort to help them, but also to maintain their privacy during this transition. There's lots of groups who, once they hear someone's left, they want to be the first one to get them up on a podium with the microphone to tell their story. And we realize that there's a lot of healing, there's a lot of just spiritual direction that they need after they leave. And so we try to provide that privacy for them and that opportunity to heal. Sometimes when we go to the sidewalk, if you've ever been there, women come out after an abortion, and the sidewalk counselors can be so compassionate to them. They offer them brochures, they offer them counseling, they tell them it's okay, we can help you, we can give you the healing that you need after this abortion has taken place. But then 5 minutes later, an abortion worker will come out. And this very same pro-lifer who is so compassionate and understanding to the women a few minutes before can become angry and condemning and mocking. I've seen it with my own eyes, people yelling cruel things, insulting things to people. And they don't realize, like I said earlier, that those workers need just as much healing, if not more, than the women who are receiving their services. We need to realize that we are a source of healing and conversion for these abortion workers as well. We can be the reason that someone has a conversion, but they won't have a conversion if they don't see Jesus in us. We have to be Jesus to them, and we might be the only opportunity they ever have. We have to remember, too, that sin takes over just a little at a time. We know in our own lives that we're not perfect and that we sin. Abortion workers go into their jobs often with good intentions. They really think they're helping. As Abby says, she thought she was doing good work for women. She thought she was doing what was right. And slowly, gradually, they start to have little twinges of doubt. They start to realize that they're not doing the right thing, but it takes so long and they're so enmeshed in their work that they don't see their sin. Kind of reminds me of someone I know, myself. All mortal sin has equal weight in God's eyes, and we all fall into sin at times. But often we look at people who work in the abortion movement with double, triple the condemnation and hatred. And we need to realize that they're sinners just like us, and they deserve the mercy and love of God, and they'll only get that through our witness. We need to look upon them as Jesus looks upon us when we sin, with love, mercy, and compassion, and we need to welcome them back to the truth. Now, time and time again, my hometown of Bryan College Station, Texas, has shown that we are adamantly pro-life and that we actively stand against abortion. As I've mentioned, the Coalition for Life was started right there. 40 Days for Life had its roots and began in Bryan College Station, and our abortion clinic closed down in August of 2013, which was a huge victory for us. These were epic victories, in fact, but for us to say in our community or anywhere that has an abortion facility that is closed, for us to say that we have ended abortion in that town is really false. Women continue to have unplanned pregnancies, and they continue to need our support and counseling. And if they can't get an abortion in our town, they'll drive somewhere where they can. So we need to support them in real ways. And we realized as the abortion center was closing in our community that we had an opportunity. We had an opportunity to provide and rededicate our services to offer real support to women in need. And that's what drove us to open our new maternity home, Guiding Star Maternity Home in Bryan, Texas. So as we found out that Planned Parenthood was closing, this is the story of the maternity home, that was the day that Governor Rick Perry signed the largest pro-life bill in history into effect, virtually closing all but 6 abortion facilities in our state of Texas. And Texas is really big, so that's huge. Yeah, thank you. That shut down, after 15 years of prayer and work, the abortion center in our community, where Abby used to be the director. And that day was a turning point. So as soon as Abby found out, she picked up the phone and she called me and said, "Lauren, we can't stop. We've got to do something. This is our chance. This is our chance to do something great and to help women for real in our community. We can't leave them helpless. We can't let the pro-life movement fall asleep. We have to work." And so after several months of prayer and discussion, and honestly some uncertainty, we decided to open up a maternity home in our community. Matthew 25:40 says, "In truth I tell you, insofar as you did this for the least of my brothers of mine, you did it to me." And so we were dedicated to finding the women, not just the college girls who get pregnant and need a place to lay for a few months, but the women in our community who are really suffering, really struggling, and need real help to turn their lives around. Now, we have been working with a woman named Kathleen Wilson, who runs the Mary Shelter in Fredericksburg, Virginia. If you ever feel that you are called to open a maternity home, she is the first person I would send you to. She's an amazing, wise woman who has given years of her life full-time and volunteer missionary work to open up shelters, and they now have 7 homes in that community with women living there with their children. So she works with women every day that are in crisis, and she believes that housing is honestly one of the biggest problems that these women face. Of course, there's many issues that women struggle with when they are found with a crisis pregnancy. They have physical and emotional issues, financial instability, possibly homelessness. They have a lack of education that needs to be resolved, and maybe even mental health issues and abuse. The list can go on and on. But ultimately, Kathleen told me that in most cases, it really comes down to whether or not the woman has a clean, safe place to live for herself and her baby and her other children. And I think we all need to try to remember and remind ourselves daily that we need to put ourselves in her place and try to understand the fear that goes through her mind. Now, what we want to do with Guiding Star Maternity Home is to provide these women with a place that's not only safe and clean, but some place that is beautiful and encouraging as well. We want our women to be inspired. We want them to know how to work and work hard and be joyful. And we're dedicated to encouraging them to grow in all the areas where they feel held back. So we're going to offer them counseling, we're going to offer them education, the fulfillment of getting their GED or going to college and getting a degree where they can actually get a job. There's many layers of setbacks that we're willing to work through with them, and we're ready to do that work. We plan on opening in January. Now, the women can arrive in our home when they are pregnant, obviously. Unfortunately, there are some women who try to move into maternity homes who aren't pregnant, and they try to fudge the system, so we will have a way of making sure, we'll double check that. And they can stay with us up to 6 to 12 months after their baby is born. We don't want to be a place where they can just come have the baby and then out you go, good luck with you. We want to help them learn how to be a good mother, get back on their feet. And also, what is great is that we allow each woman to bring up to 2 additional children with them into the home. We realized as we researched the needs in our community that a lot of women had other children already, and they find themselves in a difficult place, and that we wouldn't be serving the need in our town if we didn't let them bring additional children. So we adjusted our plan, adjusted the places that we were going to be to make sure we had space to do that. Another goal that I think is important that we found is that we are trying to not duplicate services in our ministry. There's lots of great organizations like you have here that instead of just copying what they're doing and offering it ourselves, we're going to work with them to provide services to our women instead of duplicating them. So we're very excited about what we're doing there. We're excited to help these women and offer them education, counseling, healthcare options, job training, parenting and adoption training, and spiritual guidance. We want the churches in our community to become very involved with them, to invite them to church, to pick them up, to take them, give them rides and get them involved in a community where they can be appreciated and loved, and to support them and give them a stable environment to grow. We're dedicated to giving these women a hand up, not just a handout. And I think that's a really good goal in any ministry that you start if you want to serve women in need, is to provide them an opportunity to learn how to take care of themselves and their children and to get out of the cycle that they have been in that caused the crisis in the first place. Now, we're under no illusion that this is going to be easy. We've had people who started maternity homes in other states say, well, my first point of advice would be to run the other way. But if you're really going to do this, let me tell you how it's done. So we have no pie-in-the-sky ideals that this is going to be easy in any way, but we're dedicated and we have a great group in our community working hard. Now, Patricia Heaton, some of you may know her. She's a famous actress that starred in Everyone Loves Raymond for many years, and she's a staunch defender of women and of the unborn. And she has a quote that I love with all my heart. She says, "Women who experience unplanned pregnancy also deserve unplanned joy." And I think that's something that we need to take to heart in our work every day. There are women in my community and in your community right now who deserved that unplanned joy, and they're waiting for us to give them that opportunity. We need to be Christ to them. We need to offer them security, housing, and hope so that they can turn around their lives and move forward in the right direction. And we need to be those people that stand with them, that are with them so they don't feel alone and abandoned. Now, granted, Bryan College Station has a unique story. God brought together something that was very special in our community. But the truth is, there's really no secret. We're not a special town. We're just a town in America, like any other town. Our people are faithful, like you are. They've had struggles and difficulties just like you have. And they have strengths, just like you have. And the truth is that what happened in Bryan College Station, Texas, can happen anywhere. Wherever we come from, and wherever we come together in prayer, and go to the sidewalks and reach out to women with peace and love. Whenever we keep going and be faithful, even when things get difficult, good things can happen. And if we keep going and keep our faith in God, what happened in Bryan College Station, Texas, can happen anywhere. It can even happen here in California. And I've been told that sometimes people here in California can get discouraged and feel like your work in the pro-life movement is a losing battle. But we have to believe with all of our hearts that we are doing God's work. And with God, we know that anything is possible. We need to be the ones, you and I here in this room, that are willing to step in the gap, that are willing to be, maybe some people think we're crazy for what we do, that we're willing to share our stories, to share our beliefs with others. And if we do that sincerely in our workplaces, out on the streets with women in real need, with our voting, then I really think, and within our churches as well, I really think that abortion can become unthinkable, not just illegal, but unthinkable in California. Now, there's a famous priest who passed away just a few weeks ago, Father Benedict Groeschel. He's the founder of the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal in New York, and he worked his whole life with disadvantaged youth in New York City and with the homeless. And he has a quote another quote, I love quotes, that I love that's very encouraging to me. And he says, "Even when we do not choose evil, we choose the good so half-heartedly and with so many qualifications that mediocrity becomes our canonized status quo." When I read that the day that he had passed away, and it really hit me hard. I think no matter what we do and what our role is in the pro-life movement, we can all find ourselves settling for mediocrity. And so I challenge you to look at that story that you wrote down and realize what God has given you, this gift he has given you, and dedicate yourselves again to working in the pro-life movement. We need our churches, all the churches, to unite together to work for life. We can deal with theology at another time, but we can set that aside when we're working to save women and babies, right? We can say, let's talk about theology later, let's go save some lives, right? And that's what we can do. And I challenge you as Catholics, because we're the biggest part of the pro-life movement, because we have the church behind us and all their wisdom, but we can reach out. We should be the ones to reach out to the other churches in our community who also have great pro-life supporters and encourage them to join us in our work. So it's up to us, the church, to pray and discern how we can use our gifts and talents. And I really want you to think about what your personal gifts and talents are that you can offer to the pro-life movement. God has made each of you unique and unrepeatable. He has given you gifts that if you get rid of that false pride that we sometimes get in our lives, and we really look at ourselves honestly, you'll see your gifts. They're there. We all have different gifts, whether it's the grandmother who likes to knit blankets for the babies in the maternity home. We had an attorney who helped us write our policies and procedures that was immensely valuable to the opening of our home. No matter what it is, you need to think about what you can do and then find organizations and offer it sincerely with no strings attached, because that's where real power and real grace comes from. Mother Teresa said, "If you can't feed 100 people, just feed one. Start with one." I think that's important to remember. Like I said earlier, sometimes we get caught up in numbers or what the world calls success, but we need to remember that that's not what God calls success. He sees each of our souls as unrepeatable and beautiful and infinitely valuable. So we need to not worry about what it looks like on the outside, but dedicate our lives to just that one if we can. All the money and possession and houses and mountains and oceans, animals, all of creation itself has much less value than your immortal soul. Your soul is infinitely valuable, and no one in the world can fully plumb the depths of this value. How do we know this? Well, Jesus tells us, "What would it profit a man if he gained the whole world and lose his life in the process? What can a man give in exchange for his immortal soul?" So if you work all your life in the pro-life movement and only take part in saving one baby or helping one mother or working with one clinic worker, only one, do not see yourself as a failure in any regard. You have given Jesus back one of his most prized possessions. I encourage you to discern with all of your heart what you can do. No one is too young, no one is too old. We all have a part to play. So what are you doing? Are you just letting everyone else do the work? Or are you willing to pull your weight in the movement? We all have to be involved, every one of us here in this room, and find our place. You don't need a huge platform, you don't need any money, but you can still do big things. I was a 22-year-old clueless sociology major, so if I can do something, then all of you can, right? If God can do something through me, he can do anything. Rick Santorum, and I'll wrap up with this, had an interesting interview one time. Someone asked him, why, Rick, why do you think the pro-choice movement is so solid? Why do they get so much traction? What is it about them? And he simply said, they want it more. They want to win more. And I think we need to turn that around to us. We need to win more. So I challenge you to continue to pray, to ask God how he's leading you to give more, to do more, and to pray more for this movement. We have God on our side, we have truth, and we need to unite together to share our talents and our strengths and the sweat of our brow, it is hard, to bring the world to a better place where abortion is not only illegal, but unthinkable. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here. I'm so glad y'all are here, and I look forward to hearing how the rest of the conference goes, and I know we have some great speakers coming up, so thank you so much.